Hey, you Evangelized members, Josh Canning with you again for another expert interview. And today I'm delighted to introduce my guest, Tim Glemkoski. Tim is a Catholic speaker and the founder of an organization called L'Alto Catholic Institute. And this institute is really about coming alongside parishes who have made a decision to become more missionary, but need to connect some of the dots. And we just had a great conversation about parish renewal and some of the things that they do, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. Hey, you Evangelized members, so glad to be with you again for another expert interview. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Tim Glemkoski. Tim is a Catholic speaker and works in parish renewal, and I'm just so delighted he was able to join us today for a conversation. Tim, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Josh.
Good. I know we're both getting over the flu, so praise the Lord that we're able to do this from our own offices in our house, and we can kind of go blow our noses later. But anyways, thanks so much for making this time. Tim, for those of our members who might not know so much about you, why don't you just tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to find yourself doing the work that you're doing today in the church?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm from the suburbs of Chicago. So I grew up in the Chicagoland area and kind of had my big personal conversion. Yeah, I'd grown up in a Catholic family, but when I was about 18 years old and went to Steubenville, Franciscan University of Steubenville after that, and graduated with theology and philosophy degrees. And after that, tried my hand at discerning the priesthood and seminary for the Diocese of Rockford out here in the Chicagoland area, and was told by my spiritual director, he said, you can't just want to evangelize people and become a priest. You actually have to be called to, and I'm not sure that you're called. So that was a short foray into discerning that avenue. And so praise God, I'm married now and have a 2.5-year-old daughter and a 2-month-old son.
Oh, nice.
Thank you. Yeah. So I taught high school theology in Ann Arbor, Michigan for 3 years. And during that time, really began to just experience the Holy Spirit calling me to dedicate myself to parish renewal through evangelization and discipleship. A lot of the formational texts, Forming Intentional Disciples and Divine Renovation, Evangelii Gaudium came out during that time period when I was teaching. And I almost just started to really get that sense, like, this is where the Lord is moving, is this new evangelization, this call of the Second Vatican Council to the universal calls of holiness and mission for lay people. This is what the project of the next 50 years is going to be, is really making that present in parish life. And so I just started applying for director of evangelization jobs and got one in Denver, Colorado. And so my whole family moved across the country to there. And then when I was offered a job back in a parish, actually my home parish in the Chicagoland area, and we moved back to this area. Again, began to experience kind of in prayer this tugging at me to. I had seen the great work that lay apostolates had done in both of those areas, in Ann Arbor and in Denver, to really make those areas kind of hubs for intentional discipleship, and began to experience a call myself to kind of do something similar, like to create an organization that could work as a regional evangelizing catalyst, to kind of make a wider impact than just my particular parish job. And so that's where my organization, L'Alto Catholic Institute, came from, was just a way to house some of my desire to watch parishes renewed, and to find so our core project, our parish partnership, really came from just looking almost at the local church at large and saying, how do we help? It really wasn't just like it really flowed from seeing that what parishes need was people who could come alongside them and accompany them into being more missional and more missionally oriented. So that's what I do now full time, is I'm the president of L'Alto Catholic Institute. So people ask us sometimes, well, so are you consultants? Like, you're a consultant? And I know the word shouldn't bother me, but it doesn't bother me, I guess. But like, the word we use is like, no, we're like that Pope Francis word, like, we accompany parishes. Like, we come alongside of you to help teach you how to do that, because that's the way we view our parish partnership. Is it's not just a Skype call once a week with your leadership, or we're kind of just giving you some strategy, kind of throwing a playbook at you and like letting you run after it. Like, we really kind of get down into the muck with our parishes. Like, we intentionally limit how many parishes we work with at a time, so that we can, because that's where we felt like something was being lost in translation. I saw so many pastors grabbing a divine renovation or forming intentional disciples, being like, this is what I want for my parish, this is what we're supposed to be, and then just fumbling out of the gate, trying something and just having all this resistance, or not even knowing where to begin and feeling kind of paralyzed by that fact. And so or maybe just not even having the time, like kind of like literally just saying, I'd love to start this, but I have 3 funerals this week, and I'm at the hospital every night, and all of our masses, and so that was kind of the idea was there, could we help to bridge some of those, or help parishes get over some of those roadblocks to cultural renewal happening.
Wow. I wish my wife was in on this conversation, because she's all about implementation. She's all about, like, let's take the theory and, like, figure out what does it look like in the next steps. So what does that look like in your experience in terms of a pastor who's kind of caught the vision, and wants to bring his sort of team into the sort of vision, and then want to go forward in maybe transforming the way a parish is and operates. What do those first conversations look like when you sit down and accompany a parish like that?
Yeah, the very first thing we do in our partnership is just really get the lay of the land. Some of the ways I like to talk about really like what we do with a parish, because it's this 9-month relationship that we have, and so 1,000,001 decisions are made, and different touches and everything. So it was almost difficult for us to describe when a pastor would say, well, what is a parish partnership? We're like, I don't know, it's a lot of things, like what is, because we're really trying to launch this culture shift. And so that takes a ton of stuff. So what we've begun talking about is our 5 key deliverables. And that's been a helpful way for us to really explain what's it going to take to start turning if a parish is kind of the Titanic, and you really got to crank at that wheel in order to get the nose turned. What are those 5 things? So the first thing we see is just inundating vision, just like grabbing hold of that vision for here's what a parish exists for, to form disciples, to evangelize, and then just hyper preaching that message. I think if we're not sick of attempting to if we're not sick of hearing ourselves say it, we haven't communicated enough that vision. Yeah. The second thing we think is actually creating a clear path to discipleship in the parish. Like the most effective parishes are the most healthy parishes are the ones where the way to form disciples is very clearly built into the parish's structure, and it's prioritized as like this is the core of what the parish does. If everything we do is evangelizing, if everything we do is forming disciples, well then kind of nothing is at the end of the day, And do we have this clear presentation to people like our parish exists to form disciples, and here's how you become one here. Here's how you walk into a relationship with Jesus. The third thing is a leadership structure that's going to sustain the effort, because I think what happens sometimes in parishes is one of 2 things: either one person gets really activated for a culture change, and so they go off and do everything. They're building all of these efforts, and then sometimes they burn out in a year and a half, and they just want to go take a nap for the next year and a half. Right. Or we throw it to a committee. We're going to form an evangelization committee in one silo of our parish community, and no efforts are ever going to make it out of that committee that actually begin to, or maybe if they do, it just is not something we're prioritizing. So is there this clear leadership structure? There's a lot of ways we build that's going to sustain this effort going forward. The fourth thing we do is begin a multiplying kind of person-to-person discipleship effort into the parish, like just literally training 8 to 12 people to go do the work, like kind of adopt for themselves this personal project of forming disciples. And then the fifth thing is aligning the various ministry areas with this core vision that the pastor is communicating to form disciples. Does the RCIA process meet that mission? Are we evangelizing people in RCIA? Are we just kind of teaching them the Catholic things and then sending them on their way? Are we with marriage prep? Are we meeting people where they're at depending on their threshold of conversion? Are we, all those different areas, just helping people in those areas in parish life begin to think differently and more critically about what they're really doing.
Wow, so interesting. It's like holistic. It's like an Eastern medicine approach to parish health. You know what I mean?
It's like the chia seeds of parish evangelization or something. I don't know. Quinoa. Yeah, we're really trying to. But that was what we were seeing was like too often our tendency with like, okay, I want to become an evangelizing parish, and I'm a big Alpha fan, but it's like, okay, we started Alpha, now we're an evangelizing parish, and it's like we just want people to step back and use Alpha for sure, but use it effectively within this overall strategy for how it fits in other areas of parish life. And that's what we weren't seeing people necessarily thinking through all the way, and that's why we saw them fumbling, was because it wasn't part of this big culture change that was trying to happen. It was just, we're busy, but this is going to make us feel like we're trying to evangelize by doing something. And maybe it's, a weekend retreat experience or whatever, but it was still being siloed and relegated to one aspect of parish life.
Yeah, and there's a real danger in that. I remember hearing Father James Mallon talk about how if we do Alpha, but nothing else, around it, then it almost feels like false advertising once people are done alpha and try to engage with the parish, because they're like, this is nothing like what we just experienced. It feels completely foreign, completely different, and of course there's going to be a fall off. Whereas if I think, like you're saying, if people are seeing systems of health in a parish, then Alpha can actually be a catalyst to bring other good things into the parish. Alpha, we try to do it in our parish, thinking that Alpha, it has some of the things that we want parishes to have anyways. So it introduces some of those things. So like lay people praying with each other. That's a beautiful thing. We want every parish to have that. And Alpha kind of introduces that and gets people to take a risk there. But if that Alpha is the only place that happens, then again, it feels kind of this weird encapsulated experience that you almost feel cheated,
Yeah.
So
I know that was one of the things they even found. So in our diocese, they did a study with the Catholics Come Home series. And we have about 97,000 Catholics come to Mass every week in our diocese, like our October count or whatever.
Yeah.
And after the Catholics Come Home series, they ran those commercials. It was like 117,000, literally like a 20,000 person attendance bump like the next weekend.
Wow.
It was, and people were pumped about it. And then by the next October, they're all gone again. And it's almost because like we're inviting them back to something that they left for, maybe a reason. Like maybe there's not someone there, you're right, to welcome them and love them and accompany them. And because that hasn't been a vision that we've built into the way people understand even their role in the parish. Like what does it mean to be a part of this parish? So
Awesome, Tim. So many questions I could ask you, but speaking on the topic of in a way almost over communicating the discipleship path to people, it makes me think of like I'm a member of some of these membership sites where you can kind of see this almost thermometer or path where you're kind of making this progress, and that's apparently a really important psychological thing to know you're actually progressing somewhere, but you often don't see that in a parish. So the person who goes every Sunday and the person who shows up once in a while and the person who's daily mass goer and whatever, and wherever they are in terms of their prayer life or whatever, they might feel they're all equally members of the parish. It's interesting, this kind of idea to show people this is the journey we want you to go on. This is sort of this discipleship thing. This is how we want you to really commit and grow in your relationship with Christ as a member of this parish. In your working with parishes so far, how have you seen those parishes do that well and over communicate that well? How do they visualize it? And what are some of the best practices we might communicate to our members if they want to communicate a similar thing to their members?
Yeah, so the homily is the number one communication tool in a parish, right? And so that should be one of the places where it's probably maybe a lot of your members don't necessarily have control over the homilies at their parish, but that is one of the places, like if it's going to be consistently preached from the pulpit, that's a huge way for people to really grab hold of that message. We've done everything from it's on the website. There's big standing banners in the narthex. Like the leadership is communicating about it. People, if as much as possible, you have like the core leadership of the parish adopting where they can articulate it. Our parish exists for this reason. Here's how we form disciples here. Then even here are the tactical ways that we achieve those strategic goals of helping people encounter Christ and grow in Christ and be sent by Christ. If they're communicating in everything they do and are seeing their efforts as part of that, and that's going to take time, right? It's going to be a couple of years before even every religious ed teacher sees what they do as part of this parish's larger strategy for evangelization. But it should be there. Is it in when you train RE teachers? Is it there? Are we talking about how this effort fits in the discipleship pathway? When we're, anything we're doing, it needs to be part of it. And I think that's one of the ways it starts to really become, it should be second nature almost. Because I think too, the discipleship pathway is one of the most effective tools for actually communicating the idea that conversion and discipleship is part of what it means to be a Catholic. That kind of stops church parishes from being, I love Deacon Ralph Poyo always says, we just kind of do church. That's what we do sometimes in parishes, we do church. And if we're moving from that mentality of we do church to that my involvement in the parish is this dynamic process of conversion in my own life that then has to overflow into me bearing fruit externally. I think that discipleship pathway helps to communicate that, because now, Father Barron talks about the lazy lake of Catholic life sometimes versus like the dynamism of a river that's cutting and changing the landscape that it's a part of. And I think that gives the parish almost this identity of movement and motion, like we're going somewhere. I'm growing and then being sent out. So
yeah, what are some good examples of that visualized discipleship pathway that you can think of? I know St. Benedict's in Halifax, they have the game plan, and it's kind of this arch you can kind of see visualized. Do you have another example that we might direct our members to?
Yeah, Prince of Peace in Flowery Branch, Georgia, is a parish that they call it the Way. Yeah. And I think they're part of the Divine Renovation Network, so I think they're pulling a lot of their identity. It looks similar to even the game plan. Yeah. They're one that's communicated that really well. To be honest with you, a lot of the best ones, the best visualized ones are Protestant churches,
okay.
So that's like there's the church at Springhill in Tennessee. I know. And so that's some of that idea for us is actually there's a text called Simple Church by Tom Rainer is his name. Okay. Yeah. And he is the one that had done the study of all these churches and said, what are the healthiest churches? Is it just the ones that have, like what, almost like looking at the externals and then realize like, no, the healthiest churches were the ones where this clear path to discipleship was built into parish life. And he gives a really great way of explaining how to simplify your efforts and focus on the discipleship pathway. And so some of the people that have picked up his methodologies, I think, have some really nice graphics that kind of display. The church at Spring Hill in Tennessee, outside of Nashville, has a really nice one that I've used sometimes too. So those would be two I would direct people to.
Very cool. When you begin this process in a parish, which already is going to have a culture, for good or for bad, do you encounter resistance?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. To me, that's always like that insider resistance is always going to be like one of the significant challenges. I do think beginning with vision helps to alleviate some of that. Like if you tell people why you're making changes, it does help them to, like there's that Simon Sinek work, right? Start with why. And I do think like really building in that strong sense of a why. Like there was this in Ann Arbor, we were just in Ann Arbor, Michigan recently for like an early Christmas visit with my wife's parents, and I needed a place to work in the mornings, and my wife we needed a place to bring our daughter to kind of run around, and there was this Protestant church there that had a community center, and it was this kind of massive project, and it really existed for the community. Like they had built their facilities instead of building like a church that had like a playground on it. It really was like a community center that had like their auditorium for their services in the back.
Wow.
And it was this really interesting vision for like, and so I asked the pastor when I met him there, like, what is this all about? And he said that they had been meeting in their like a hotel ballroom for 10 years, their community, and they had always had this identity of like that mission existing for their community was built into them. So when they built their facilities, it made sense to them to really orient it outward, even their facilities, instead of just toward their community. But he said that was a very tough sell because you're doing a millions of dollars capital campaign, and people don't necessarily want to give something that's for somebody else. It's like they want to build the testament to their community. But he said, so what they did is they just talked for a year about their parish existing for their neighbors, and then it didn't ask for a single dollar. And at the end of that year, they started asking for money, and they had $9 million raised in like, and I think that's some of it. Overcoming that resistance is just helping people to see the vista with you, to like see the why. And then I do think like one of the things I heard one of our point people at one of the parishes we're working with right now say the other day is at some point she just had to like admit and that like the ideal that Jesus presents us for parish life is more important than like a vocal minority that might not be, the old money in a parish that might not be content with the direction things are going. And that as like, if we're going to adopt leadership. So she was saying this to a group, we were talking to a group of people about our project. She was saying, and that she just at some point had to like accept that people were going to be upset and they weren't going to understand, and hopefully they would at some point. But like almost this idea that like the train's going. You know what I mean? Like the train has to leave the station. We can't just keep getting blocked by our own fear of people not liking us or being upset with us or not agreeing with our vision. Like they just have to kind of get on, and not that we don't want anyone to leave. We don't want anyone to go anywhere, but train's got to move. Train's got to move. It's just got to move. And so
Yeah.
We just have to have kind of almost like the leadership chutzpah in order to help bring people as much as possible, communicate the vision. Because I don't like the idea that we just need to like change things and people need to accept us or get out. You know what I mean? Like loving people. Like when we presented this vision at one of our parishes, a couple couples actually came to me after and like were pretty upset with me because they had heard about this initiative and they weren't pleased with the church doing this and stuff. And I really in that moment was just as much as possible just trying to love them as persons, like not even at that moment just fight for my ideals, but just like encounter them. And now one of those couples has been like they're leading a discipleship group, you know, like because we kind of come full circle with them. And
wow.
So there, you know, there are those small successes, but certainly resistance for sure, no doubt.
A lot of value in what you learned from that Protestant pastor. It's so interesting that there was such a long runway before the actual sort of ask happened. You know, so this is the vision. This is why we exist. This is the vision. This is why we exist. And just giving them so much time to catch on to that and get excited about that before the actual okay, now it's time to go. And I think that's something's really, you know, I think could bring hope to our members. We have some pastors and bishops as members as well, just to think on that. It's you know, I know that Father James Maligan, I always quote him a lot, but he says churches grow by addition and by attrition. And so yeah, we may lose some people, but maybe with a lot of strong communication over a long period, maybe we don't have to lose a lot of people. I mean, that's the hope at least, right?
Yeah.
Tim, what's some of the things you've seen in parishes that have made it a long way through this process, this 9-month sort of accompaniment process? What are some of the things that you've seen in the way in which people feel about the parish, from the pastor down? How do they feel differently once they've sort of begun to understand their parish differently and kind of align differently with their parish?
Well, it's interesting. One of the pastors that we worked with, you know, kind of at one point, we were having just a personal conversation, and he was revealing to me how much it had actually re-energized his priesthood, you know, because he had wanted this change to happen and just felt like almost isolated in that, like he was the only one here that really wanted it, and he just kind of didn't, you know how to make those changes, and just like how much hope had really, you know, flooded his priesthood because of that. And so that's kind of an interesting thing for me, is like I'm a big believer in like the spiritual fatherhood of pastors, and I think sometimes it's become commonplace now, I hear in certain circles, for us to almost like demonize certain churches that are stuck in maintenance mode, almost as if to say like that the pastors of those churches aren't sitting in their rectory some evenings like really bummed about the state of their parish. Do you know what I mean? Like we almost act like, oh, they must be sitting there just being like, thank God, like we're not, you know, achieving our mission to form disciples. Like, you know, a lot of these men became priests because they wanted people to encounter Christ, you know, and what we've kind of been able to supply is that how. And so I've seen that re-energizing, like that hope that comes when it's like, you want this and we kind of know how and we can help you get there. And it's like, thank God, you know what I mean? Like, thank God someone's came and said that. And then for sure, I think, you know, to me, the biggest change I've seen in, or the biggest like positive, you know, our leadership is very clued into the vision and what we're trying to bring and the process at large and the strategy and everything. But really even just like at the level of the pew sitters, you know, like just how energizing that it is to be pulled back into the idea, like the why that this all exists. I realized this when I was teaching high school, like I was trying to teach so many doctrines that just had like no coherence to them because they didn't get like that core charismatic why. Like it's almost like, well, why is morality even a thing in the first place? Like we have to step so far back with people, but when people catch that you know, like what exists because of this relationship, and that just to watch people, it's almost like you just watch people's souls refreshed, like that this is just like that living water is a real thing, and comes as a response to apprehending that core reality of like why the church exists and how everything fits in this big picture. And that, you know, so those people aren't maybe necessarily energized by the big picture of we're becoming a parish and implementing these structures that are helping us be more evangelizing, but they are energized by the kind of mission that's putting them more in touch with, or the kind of message that's putting them more in touch with, you know?
Amazing. Wow. Tim, I got to say, I'm so encouraged to just to hear about the work that you're doing. It's such an important piece. It's one of those things that it's kind of interesting when you really sort of begin to sort of tackle the idea of the new evangelization and commit to it. You start to sort of see like, okay, so now we have this, but then what about this? Oh, now we have this, but what about this? And it really sounds like you found an important niche in Lalto Catholic Institute to just really come alongside and support parishes who just need a little bit of extra support and friendship and coaching and going where they want to go. And I think that's just fantastic that you found that, and I hope that our members can also just explore your work and find out what's available should their parish be interested in exploring that. I would also love to hear, I know you're a Catholic speaker as well. I got a chance to look at some of your work online. I would say it's interesting, but a lot of the language you use and the way you speak, you remind me very much of my co-founder, Michael Dopp. A lot of similarities there. I'm sure you guys would be fast friends. But could you just maybe, this is a question I love to ask a lot of our guests, but what's something that you wish everybody knew about evangelization?
I would say two things. Can I use two things?
Yeah, go for it.
They'll be quick ones.
Yes.
The first one is that I've encountered, I've noticed that I've started to encounter some resistance in, I went to a very conservative Catholic, very Orthodox Catholic college. I got my master's at the Augustine Institute in Denver, which is similarly, like I have a very, Orthodox Catholic formation, but I've started to notice that there are people concerned in the church that this new evangelization project is like, an attempt to just kind of whitewash some of the Catholicism out of our faith or something. And that's where I just go back to like my hero, John Paul II, all the time. You know what I mean? Like this is, this project is something that those who really are attempting to undertake it are undertaking it with like a full Catholic worldview. That this isn't, I'm almost, that's an interesting thing to me, to find that resistance in circles, and it's based out of people's love for the church and just concern that, that we might lose something of what makes us unique in attempting to evangelize people. Nobody I know who's really attempting this wants us to not be a Catholic church anymore. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's kind of the first thing. The second thing I guess I would say is, when I was working at a parish still, I had someone contact me in the parish, and they had been super interested in evangelization. Like they really started to catch a heart for like, I just want other people to know Christ. And it was a beautiful email. And she knew that I did some speaking. And so she immediately said, like, how do I become a Catholic speaker? And I think some of the reason for that is in our church, like a lot of these great witnesses of Catholic are people like, your co-founder, who do a lot of speaking. And so people see them and say, okay, if I want to evangelize, that's what I got to do. I got to go find a way to get in front of audiences and give talks. And Jesus' own model of ministry doesn't necessarily just reflect that reality. He's not just traveling and speaking, so much of his effort is poured into these. And so that's why I said to her, I was like, honestly, if you really want to evangelize, like find 6 people and start start discipling them and working with them and building relationships with them. And I don't know if that's, I don't think that was something that she really connected with that idea, but that's something that I'm just so big on, is like we work with parish structures, because I think that the parish actually exists for evangelization. Like Pope Francis says in Evangelii Gaudium, it's not an outdated institution. Like this isn't an ineffective model for the ministry that we're trying to do. In fact, a lot of Protestant churches are trying to figure out how to do church plants to replicate some of our parish system that had kind of spread out and allowed itself to insert itself into communities to evangelize those communities. But I think at the end of the day, like evangelization is about relationships. Like if the one thing I would want people to know is like the most effective thing you can do, I'm just so convicted of that, is that multiplying discipleship model, to just work with a small group of people and to teach them to disciple other people as well. Like if there was something you could start today that would actually make an impact, working with your parish structures might be something outside of your circle of influence, but you can always do that. And then I guess 3 things, but at the same time, if you're going to try to go to a pastor or a church staff member and attempt to pitch them a vision for making a church more evangelizing, like bring value when you do it. Don't just go to like your pastor and say, you need to change this, this, and this, because I read this book. It's like when you're doing it, like that's what one thing they're trying to do with parishes is actually say, and here's how we can help. So when you're coming to do that, I think pastors don't want to just be told the 10 things that they need to do differently. They want to hear how you're going to actualize that. So bring value when you're talking to parish leaders. So three things. Do you want to hear 10?
Love it. No, absolutely. Well, 3 things of immense value. Absolutely. No, I really appreciate that, Tim. That's fantastic. Tim, where can people go to hear more from you?
Yeah, so our website is lalto.co or laltocatholic.com. I guess both of those URLs. They can see kind of more of our mission there in our site. I'm on Twitter at Glemkoski. I tweet when I want to bounce ideas off of people, so you can see what I'm ruminating on that day if you want to go there. And then my personal website is timglemkoski.com. So you can find me all those places.
Fantastic. Tim, once again, really appreciate it early in this new year as we're both getting over sickness. So I just really appreciate that you made time to chat with us today. So thanks very much. And I just pray that God bless your ministry and just support you in what you're doing, because it's fantastic stuff.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, I really appreciate you having me on. It was an honor to be with you.
Oh, you bet.